Hello. If you've never met me, my name is Ben Myers. I tend to blog and stream about accessibility and core web technologies. And I'm a fan of a little project called Eleventy. Some of y'all might have heard of it. Sometimes its creator, Zach, likes to publish new features, release new features in a canary build, and I like to do what I can to break them. And so today I wanted to share with y'all my journey with building a Wordle clone using Eleventy's new Edge plugin. So this right here, this is classic Wordle. And I wanted to talk about this a bit because I love it. I've been playing consistently just about every day. My D&D party, we've got like a channel in our little D&D Discord where we drop our results every day. This is great. This brought like so much joy to this past March, especially. I feel like a lot of people were talking about it. This is a really great site overall. And I wanted to talk a bit about how it was built first, the original Wordle, so we can compare and contrast with the Edge way that we're about. For those of you who don't know, the original like actual Wordle game is built using web components. So I'm pretty sure the grid here of your guesses is a web component. I think even individual cells are web components. All of this stuff is shipped as client-side JavaScript. In fact, there's even more stuff shipped than you might have realized, because one of the things that the original Wordle does is it ships two arrays of strings. The first is a list of every solution going forward. So like starting like day one of Wordle, there's just this big array of every word. So you could even pull up like, oh, I know like today is like day 340 or whatever. You could go find index 340 and you could figure out what the word is supposed to be, because this is shipped to the client. It's just absolutely available. And then there's another array, which is a list of all 5-letter words in Wordle's dictionary, basically, that are not solutions. And so every time you make a guess, Wordle goes through and it like iterates over both of those arrays, and it determines like, is this even a valid word, let alone is this a solution, which I think is really interesting. Personally, that's probably not how I would have done it. However, I actually do think that there are advantages to that approach. For one thing, because you're shipping everything, this means that the end user could, if they're worried about a takeover by a journalistic organization that is also known for crosswords, you could download the entire thing and have it running as a progressive web app that never needs to see the internet again. You just have a fully complete Wordle game that does not need to reach any APIs or anything like that. I think that there is some merit to that approach. But I wanted to see if Wordle could be built the complete opposite way, with exactly 0 client-side JavaScript, just to see if it could be done. And so I built a proof of concept, put it out on Twitter, and delightfully, like one person even replied like, oh, finally, Wordle can finally be played on a Kindle, which I found delightful. So I wanted to share with you my journey in building this 0 client-side JavaScript Wordle clone. And the way I'm going to do that is not through, we're actually going to hop in the code and we're just going to do some live coding. So wish me luck, because you know how live code, you know how that goes. So we're going to be using Eleventy Edge. Here's the documentation for it. You don't need to worry about that today, because today I am your documentation. I've actually already spun up a Eleventy project. I've started it off with an index.liquid template. I've actually started scaffolding some of the things we need. So we've got a table that we're going to use for our grid. This table has a caption, because if you didn't know, your tables need captions, because those captions provide an accessible name for the table. So when a screen reader user navigates to the table, they're informed what the table is. It's akin to like labeling a section or something like that. And so I've given it a caption, and then I've hidden the caption, because like I figure you probably know that that's what this is. And then I also need to have a bit of text that says like you won or you lost, or if you're still actively playing, we need a form for you to be able to submit your results. And so that's really what I've got. Other than that is a just completely run-of-the-mill Eleventy starter. So what do we need to do first? Well, first, we need to make sure we're on a version of Eleventy that supports the like Edge plugin. So this is going to be the 2.0 Canary 7 or above. However, today, we're specifically going to be operating on Canary 11, because Zach, please correct me if I'm wrong, but Canary 11 was the one that introduced the ability to use global data, or like add Edge specific global data into your Edge log. Cool, thank you. So that's what we're going to be using. So we're going to go ahead and install. tend to use Yarn. So we're going to go ahead and install Eleventy at canary. And while we're at it, we're also going to install Netlify CLI locally. This is going to allow us to run the Netlify CLI, which in turn is what allows us to support the Edge logic during local development. So that is currently running. We'll give it a moment to think. Zach, if you want me to build the docs for you, I'm happy to build the docs for you. Anyways, yeah, so we're now complete. We've got the latest versions. We've got 2.0 Canary 11. So let's go ahead and install our Edge plugin. So we're just gonna, require Eleventy. And I'm going to pull in. Zach, you might actually be able to clarify why we're installing Netlify CLI locally. But basically, I guess this is just a way to guarantee that everyone has the same version of the CLI and therefore is running the Edge functions the exact same way. So that's why I'm installing it locally, whereas normally I would install a CLI like that. All right, so I've got the Eleventy Edge plugin. Let's go ahead and add this. So here we go. Easy as that. We don't need this file again. We now have our plugin installed. So, okay, good to know. Good to know. All right. And now let's see, what should we do next? We should probably just go ahead and run a build. So npm run build. And notably, we have some new files, including some generated Edge function logic. So let's go ahead and add that stuff to our git ignore. For the just full disclosure, I do have the, how in cooking shows, they always have a cake just ready in the oven for you so that you don't have to worry about coming up with a whole bunch of stuff in Scratch. I've got that up in an editor in my other window. So we're going to go ahead and ignore the new stuff that's been created, except for we're going to leave in this Eleventy Edge JS file that's been created. I'm just going to, for my personal preference, I like to format everything with tabs, but so this is what we got. This is what Eleventy gives us out of the box. We're creating a new instance of the Eleventy Edge plugin, I guess is how we're going to call that in this case. And this Edge instance actually has basically its own Eleventy configuration that you could do. So anytime you're doing things like add shortcode or add filter or add global data, as we'll see in your .eleventy.js, you can do similar stuff in here for specifically your Edge handling logic. And let's see, now that we've got that function, we actually need to tell our site that every page, or we need to tell our site that our pages should be interpreted with this Edge plugin. I've grown to thinking of Edge as a middleware. So what happens when you request an Eleventy site, or just I guess any site through a CDN, your computer, your client reaches out to the server, and server says, the CDN says, hey, I've got this file. What's changed about Edge is that now that CDN node that's closest to you that you're getting the file from can do basically some extra processing on this file. And that extra processing has information about your specific request, including things like your query parameters and stuff like that. Notably, it includes your headers, including your cookies, for instance. And so it uses some of that information to process and transform your output in some way. But to do that, we basically need to tell our site hey, point to this Edge function that we've created and just kind of process this page with this Edge function. And the way we're going to do that is in our Netlify toml. So this stuff so far is all coming from the Eleventy docs. Basically, we're saying for every page on our site, send this page through the Eleventy Edge function that we've got. So send it through this logic that we've got right here. And yeah, this is what we need to set up our site with the Edge plugin, basically. We haven't actually really done anything with the Edge, but now our site, once it's deployed to Netlify, anytime someone hits those pages, that page will be filtered through this middleware first. So let's go ahead and start running. And the way we are going to do this is actually through npx. I've got this command, I think it's just npx. There we go. Yeah, npx netlify dev. So we're executing the Netlify CLI instead of Eleventy's baked in dev server. So we're now running all of this and we've got our nice handy page. Cool. So up next, what I want to do is I just want to simply have a concept of today's word. We're not going to do anything yet towards guessing that word. We're just going to have a word of the day, a randomly selected 5-letter word for the day. And gotta find my editor. There it is. And so how are we going to do this? Well, I don't want the client, I don't want the user's browser to have any information as to what the word of the day is. The word of the day needs to be chosen at the edge level. And basically only the CDN is aware of what the word of the day is. We're not shipping giant arrays like Wordle, like the classic Wordle does. Instead, the edge just knows how to get today's word. So let's go ahead and create a utility to handle getting that word. So I'm going to create, I don't know why sometimes it needs me to do it twice, but I'm going to create a new folder in here. I like to call it utils, and I'm going to create a new file in here. Let's call it get today's solution. And in here, what we're going to do is, like I mentioned, the kind of everything is pre-cooked. We have a giant word list that I generated. This is taking the 30% most popular words in the English language and then filtering it down to the ones that were 5 letters. Some of these words are crude. I'm going to be honest, I haven't taken the time to filter through them. So there are some spicy words in here, perhaps. Spicy, notably, I believe is also in here. So we have a giant list in here. I'm just going to collapse that because we don't need to see these, but these are all the possible words we could choose from. At this point, we want to randomly choose one of these words. So I'm going to now say export default. Oh, it would help if I spelled words correctly. Get today's solution. And at this point, we want to randomly choose a word, but it's not going to be entirely random because this logic is going to be executed every time the page loads. And what we want to do is we want to guarantee that the word is stable, that it's not changing on every page load, because otherwise that would be quite pointless, but also very entertaining. And as we all know, web dev cannot be entertaining in the slightest. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to do some pseudo random generation here. And we're going to pass it the day's date as our seed. So that way, as long as the date is the same, we will always get the same output. And to do this, I actually needed to use a library that already existed in Dino. So all of this edge function logic is running in the Dino runtime. And so instead of using NPM packages, we're using Dino packages. And this is actually something I observed as when I was building this out for the first time, actually a bit of a stumbling block. A, because I wasn't really familiar with the Dino ecosystem, but B, the Dino ecosystem is not quite as fleshed out as the NPM ecosystem. So it actually took me a while to find a package I needed in the first place. But what I eventually found was a Dino package called Vegas, which handles our pseudo-random selections. So we're going to go ahead and use Vegas. If you're unfamiliar with Dino, one of the cool things about it is that when you want to use a package, you give it a fully qualified URL like this, and Dino just knows to fetch this from this URL. So you don't have to worry about a local node modules folder. You don't have to worry about npm install and that kind of stuff. You just import directly from this URL. So this is us pulling in Vegas. And now I wanted to get today's date. And so here's how I'm going to do that. And I'll explain my reason for this afterwards. So we're going to get the ISO string. And what's notable here is this is going to be the same regardless of what time zone you're in. So classic Wordle, the new word switches over at your local midnight. However, for my Wordle, I wanted everyone's new word to shift at exactly the same time. So people who were a few time zones ahead didn't have some sort of advantage there. So we instead are using the ISO string, and this is the ISO string is going to give you as well the hours and minutes and that kind of stuff. We don't want that. We just want the year, month, date. So I'm going to use split to lop off the end, and we're just getting today's date. So now that we've got that, we can do const rng equals make. So now we're seeding our generator with the day's date, and then we can now do const solution equals rng dot random pick words. So it's going to use our seeded pseudo random number generator to pick a word from this list, and then we return it. So now we have we want to return solutions. There we go. All right. So now we've got the word of the day, and I just want to get it onto the page, right? We're going to be cheating today. So we're going to pull that in here. Let me get the, yep. We're going to do const today's solution equals get today's solution. And now at some point, I just want to be able to show this on the page. So we need to somehow let Eleventy know that today's solution exists and what it is. And so I'm actually going to define this as some global data here. So we have our little Eleventy config here, add global data. I'm going to call this solution and today's solution. And now I just want to drop this onto the page. So let's go to our liquid template here. And to use anything Edge, right? Because all of this stuff is being built ahead of time. To use anything Edge, you have to use the Edge shortcode here. And I'm going to pass it liquid as well to let it know how to parse some of the stuff inside. But there we go. Let me also bring this into HTML liquid for better syntax highlighting. There we go. And in here, we have access to our global data. And just to prove that like some of the stuff is being built ahead of time, I'm going to try to access that same data here outside, and we'll see what happens. So if I go now to my browser, and specifically over here, and if I refresh, we get the word wacky, but we only get that once. And specifically, that's the once that's coming from the Edge shortcode. Our other paragraph tag is completely empty because global data does not exist in the actual Eleventy build. It exists through the Edge kind of middleware intersection. So that's what we've got. And I was curious to see how this stuff was working. So I took a look at the build output. And what I found is that the Eleventy Edge logic is just straight up a comment here that says Eleventy Edge with the contents of my solution. So the Eleventy Edge plugin is looking at these comments and interpreting the logic and just substituting in that moment. So you can see that we still have a normal build with an index.html that gets output, but this is how the Edge handler knows to specifically handle the Eleventy stuff. So cool stuff. Oh, good to know, Zach. Okay. So we have, I mean, we're already running out of time because this stuff is a lot. So up next, what I want to do is handle allowing the user to guess their words. Guess. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a form to our template. So we're going to come down here and God, y'all, I love forms. I've heard lately that 2022 is the year of the form renaissance, and I believe it because forms are going to be very, very key to us doing all of this without any client-side JavaScript. Let me pull up in my little pre-made stuff over here. Method equals post, and then close form. We're going to have ourselves a merry little input here. Type text. ID, guess, name, guess, and we're going to take advantage of some client-side validation stuff that we get for free with HTML. HTML is too good to us. And in fact, if we really want, we can specify that, hey, the only characters allowed in here are the alphabet, which is great, and specifically the alphabet 5 times. Okay, all right. We need to let it know what format to expect so that whenever there are errors, it tells the user what they should be doing. We can make it required. And in fact, you know what, just for the sake of it, let's go ahead and do some autofocus there. And also, it wouldn't be me without the proper semantics over here. So let's have a label here. All right. So coming back here, give it a refresh. We got a handy form. We do need also a submit button. So let's just add that right here. Button type submit. I know submit is the default type of button. However, I prefer to make it explicit. And here we go. We've got a handy little button. Excellent. And in fact, a lot of the stuff is already handled for us. So I could just put in a couple of words or a couple of letters there. It already yells at us. Excellent, excellent. But we want to go ahead and start like allowing folks to submit a word. And we need to keep track of what words they're submitting, because otherwise, if the user, if we aren't keeping track of that, right, like as the user reloads the page and stuff like that, we're going to lose access to that information. So we want to hold on to it. And the way we're going to do that is through cookies. And Eleventy Edge makes cookies fairly feasible. So what I'm actually going to do is I like keeping this Eleventy Edge function pretty universal because I could have a bunch of different pages with different edge things going on. So I'm going to actually create a new edge function called guess that specifically handles the guessing logic. And that way we keep our logic all co-located. So I've created a new guess.js inside my edge functions script here. And let's go ahead and do export default async request context. And this is always the format of an edge function like this. And in here, we're going to check basically if this was a form submission. So if request.method equals post, there's other logic that we could do here to check like specifically the like content type is form encoded. I'm not going to do that today just for the sake of time. However, what I will then do is bring over some logic that I've already got over here. So if this is a post, then what we're going to do, I've already written this. So we're going to basically take the form data that was submitted by the user. We're going to see if they submitted a guess field. We're going to take any guesses we've already got stored as a cookie. And we're going to split them up into an array so that we have a list of all the guesses so far. We're going to add the most recently submitted guest to this list, the form submission rather. We're going to add that to the list here. And then we're going to set the user's cookie, specifically their guesses cookie, to the value of the new list. So as people submit more and more words through the form, we just tack it on to this cookies list. There's one more thing we need to do to enable a new cookie is we have to specifically allow list it. The way we do that is we come to our Eleventy Edge function and we go to this cookies property here and we add the name of our cookie, which is guesses. And what I'm going to do now, just to demonstrate our guesses as they go, is I'm going to come into our little Edge shortcode here. We're going to add another paragraph here. We're going to say eleventy.edge.cookies.guesses. And if everything has worked, one can hope, we can now say, oh, method not allowed. What has happened here? That must be on the form, I would guess. Let me see. Always love live code. Let me try just real quick, just in case this is the problem. Restarting the dev server. That always tends to be my first bet. We're just gonna, whoop. Let's see what's, okay. Let's try, we can, I found that when I do, this is what it is. I didn't tell the site to use my new Edge function. So I got to do that real quick. We call this one guess, and we're only going to apply this one to the home page because that's an option that we've got. This should work. Goodness, yes. URL is not oh, okay. I've got that. Yep. These are the struggles of live code demos for sure. I guess over here. There we go. Okay, so what I needed to do is I had a variable here I forgot to port over. And now we try. There we go. Okay, so you can see it remembers the word green. It'll add the word howdy, stuff like that. I could say weird, and I can refresh this as many times as I want, and it proceeds, right? Like this stuff saves, it perseveres, it persists. That's the word I'm looking for. And so we're able to keep track of what the user has guessed. Fantastic. However, I would quite like this to instead look more like a fancy table, right? So how are we going to do that? How are we going to render this as a table? Well, first of all, we're going to go to our index.liquid here. We're going to actually bring our table. As you might imagine, our table needs some edge processing here. So we're actually going to bring this into the edge shortcode over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a filter here to render some markup based on what the solution is, as well as what the user has most recently guessed, or what their guesses have been. So just going to real quick, because I know we're already a little over, we're just going to absolutely speed run adding some stuff here. Okay, I'm going to create a new utility here, call this display table. And display table is going to have two functions in it. One is some logic I wrote ages ago to parse an individual Wordle guess against, and basically tell you for each letter whether it was in the correct location or whether it's out of place or whether it was wrong. And then I've got this other function here called display table, which uses that validate Wordle guess logic to generate basically a whole bunch of rows and stuff like that. So we're going to go ahead and now add this display table here as a filter. So I'm going to come back here to Eleventy Edge. We're going to go back into our Edge config here, and Eleventy config dot add filter. We're going to call this table. We're going to call the display table. It imports my display table function. And now I can come back into my liquid here. We can now actually display the table here. So we'll add a little T body because table semantics are important. And we'll say Eleventy Edge cookies guesses. We're going to take all the guesses that folks have or the user has provided. We're going to pass it to our table function, and we're going to pass it solution. Remember that solution is global data here, so it knows what the correct word is. And when we come back here, we have ourselves a little table. And what's going on here is if I inspect this, currently we've got no styles for individual cells. However, we have all the markup to tell us whether cells are correct or not. In fact, this one is out of place right here. So we know that there's a W just on the third. This one right here is in the correct location. And so we know that there should be a Y in the fifth location here, stuff like that. The row also has a table heading that is visually hidden that has the full word. That way, as a screen reader user is navigating through the table, they're told the full word in addition to whatever letter they're on, just to help make things a little cleaner. So yeah, let's go through and let's add some extra styles, though, just to make this accessible for anyone who isn't using a screen reader. When will we think of the non-screen reader users? Honestly, let's go ahead and just add, where's my little pre-made stuff over here? Okay. What I'm going to add is, and we'll remove this stuff for now, just so we can see everything as colors. First of all, I want to call out that what I'm doing here is a bad practice. Color alone should not be used to convey information. In fact, if you see my actual Wordle that I made, I go through and I add more information. In here, I use like little icons and stuff like that to indicate. Just for the sake of expediency here, though, I've gone with color alone, most regrettably. But we do have our individual cells are being highlighted here. We can also make this look a little cleaner, even give the user the sense that they're not reloading a page, but rather that things are changing on the page by adding some clever use of animations. So I'm adding a latest guess class onto the final row of the user's guesses. And now as I come back here and I refresh, your most recent guess fades in. And so if I come in and I say, I think the word is actually tacky, that fades in. Look at that, wacky stuff. Like, I'm going to leave it here. There's more that we could do. There's more I have done on the Wordle to provide cleaner experience. One thing that I was doing as I was working on this ahead of time was I took advantage of the cookies to conditionally add global data to indicate a game state. So like whether you'd won, lost, or were still playing. And I was using that to toggle what stuff goes down here. So that's something that I'm going to leave as an exercise to the viewer as well. But yeah, there were just interesting things to be found with doing all of this with zero client-side JavaScript. totally doable, it turns out, thanks to HTML semantics and just being able to use cookies as our chief source of truth for rendering this kind of stuff. So there's more to be done on this for sure. I want to add more validation as to like whether you even put in a valid word and stuff like that. This was my journey building this tool, and I hope y'all have enjoyed this. I know it's been a rapid fire thing, but hopefully you've gotten to see a bit of the kind of Eleventy Edge workflow, and you have a sense for how that might fit into your own projects as well.